And I'd like to welcome you to the Unstack the Deck rally, and this is part of our Unstack the Deck campaign. And before we get started, I want to see if I can enlist your help and support. We're trying to send a message to the government, and part of that message comes from you. It comes from your presence here at this rally, but we also want to magnify our impact on social media. So all of us have one of these, right? So before we leave, I want you guys to commit to doing a number of things with your phones. I want you to take pictures of yourself. I want you to take pictures of your friends, your brothers and sisters in your unions, and I want you to post those pictures on every social media platform that you can think of, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and if you're using a hashtag, please use the hashtag UnstackTheDeck. That's our campaign. The government knows that's our campaign, and we want them to see the power that comes when working people come together. Okay, so I'm going to start today with a simple question, and that question is this. Who in the audience works for a living? You know, Alberta is a province of working people. We're a province of people who take pride in their work. And in fact, compared to other provinces, we have more people in the working force as a proportion of our adult population than anyone else. So we're workers and we work damn hard. And as workers, we know that we spend an awful lot of time at work. We do it to make a living. We do it because we take pride in the work that we do. And we do it because we want to help build our province. But because we spend so much time at work, we think it is important that if we're spending that much time at work, then working people should be treated with dignity and fairness when they're there. But the problem is that for the last 30, maybe 40 years, that has not always been the case. And in fact, one of the reasons that workers in this province haven't been given the dignity and respect that they deserve in their workplaces and for the work that they do, one of the reasons that we haven't received that dignity and fairness and respect is because of the labor laws that have been passed by successive Conservative governments in this province. So that's why we're here today. We're here to talk about legislation. In particular, we're here to talk about the Employment Standards Code, which is the legislation that provides the basic floor of rights for all workers in this province who aren't lucky enough to have the protection of a union negotiated collective agreement. That's about 75% of workers in this province. But we're also here to talk about that other important piece of legislation, the Labor Relations Code, which is the piece of legislation that sets the rules that allow people to join unions and negotiate collectively, to negotiate contracts collectively with their employers. So we're here today because rules matter. You know, when you think of a hockey game or a football game, everyone would agree that the game will only play out fairly if the rules are clear and they don't give an advantage to one side or another. And in fact, I think, how many hockey fans do we have in this audience? Okay? There's a little thing called the NHL playoffs going on right now, and I think some important things might have happened for supporters of hockey in Edmonton recently. In fact, there's probably something important going to happen tonight. So we all follow hockey, we all follow other sports, and I think as hockey fans, as sports fans, if we were to watch a game in which the rules had been deliberately designed to favor one team over the other, we would cry foul. And we would say that the results of those games were illegitimate. Well, brothers and sisters, we are here today to cry foul. We are here today to make the argument that the rules of the game in terms of the rules that govern our workplaces and the rules that govern our relationship with employers, especially those rules that set out how we join unions and negotiate contracts. Those rules are rigged. And you know, there's been much said about the fact that our labor laws here in Alberta are 30 years old. And some people say 30 years is enough. And I think we're here to say that 30 years is enough. But you know what? Our criticism of the Labor Code and the Employment Standards Code goes way beyond the fact that they haven't been revised in 30 years. Our criticism has to do with what those pieces of legislation say and what they do and what they mean to working people. Yeah. And you know, I just want to give you a little bit of context. What was happening 30 years ago when the Employment Standards Code was written by, you know, one of those many conservative governments that we had here in Alberta? What was happening in 1988 when we got that Employment Standards Code? What was happening in Alberta in 1988 when we got our Labor Relations Code? Well, I'll tell you, brothers and sisters, that it was a time of conservative political ascendancy, and the big figures of the day were people like Margaret Thatcher in the UK, Ronald Reagan in the States, and Brian Mulroney here in Canada. And they had an agenda. They had an agenda which at the time was new, but today we're very familiar with. It was a conservative agenda that was built on a number of pillars. One of those pillars was privatization. They didn't like public services, so they said, give it to the market. And we know how that worked out. Another pillar was tax cuts for the wealthy. That was the time where they started saying, you know what? These rich people are having too much of a hard time. We're supposed to feel sorry for them. And so that started what became 30 years of tax cuts, which has bankrupted our public treasuries, undermined our ability to pay for public services, and basically undermined all these services that ordinary working people rely upon, like healthcare, education. We didn't have money to build infrastructure. So there was the pillar of privatization, there was the pillar of tax cuts for the wealthy, and of course there was a pillar of deregulation that led to things like the financial collapse that destroyed the economy, gutted some of our pension plans in 2008. But one pillar of that conservative monolithic strategy that started to move to the forefront of the political stage in the 80s, one of those pillars that wasn't discussed enough, but which has affected all of us as working people profoundly, was a pillar that had to do with labor market policy. Because at the same time that they were privatizing and cutting budgets and giving corporate royalty and tax giveaways to the wealthy, at the same time they were doing all of those things that became pillars of this conservative political strategy, they were also attacking working people. And their attack was focused on where they knew our strength was. The real strength of working, because we by definition, we don't have the money that corporations have. We don't have the influence that CEOs have. We're not wealthy or well-connected. The power that working people have, and it's really the only power that we have, is the power that comes from collective action. The power that comes when we come together as colleagues in our workplace, as brothers and sisters, the power that comes when we come together in unions and federations, the power that comes when we see a goal, set a priority, and work towards it. And sisters and brothers, what the right wing realized way back in the 80s is that if they wanted to implement the right wing agenda, they had to go after the power of working people. And the power of working people was built upon the foundation of union rights and union activism. So in order to enact this agenda of theirs, that final pillar of their plan was an attack on unions. And so I say all of this because the labor legislation that we're here today to protest was developed in that context. It didn't just fall out of the sky. It didn't just develop by itself. It was part of a political program to undermine the power of working people and the unions that represented them. So what did we get in 1988 when the former progressive conservative government at the time introduced legislation? Well, we got an employment standards code, a code that was supposed to provide the basic floor of rights for working people without collective agreements. We got an employment standards code, and we got a floor of rights that was full of holes. We also got a labor relations code, and I want to put this in context. The labor relations code is deliberately designed in other jurisdictions. It's supposed to provide the rules by which working people could come together in unions and bargain collectively. But in 1988, the government of the day, sitting in this house behind us, passed a labor relations code that was supposed to, as other labor relations codes were supposed to do, provide the rules for organizing and bargaining. It's supposed to give legitimacy and a framework for workers to exercise their union rights. But we got a code that didn't even acknowledge the existence of trade unions. Can you imagine a labor code that doesn't even, in its preamble, acknowledge that unions exist? And I'll tell you, that's the code that we've had for the last 30 years. But that was just the start. It was supposed to provide the rules for organizing and bargaining, but it did the opposite. It did the opposite. It inhibited organizing. It inhibited bargaining. And so here we are 30 years later with an employment standards code that provides a floor of rights that's full of holes. We have a labor relations code that does the opposite of what labor relations codes are supposed to do. But it's gotten worse. But in some ways it's gotten better. And I want to tell you why. Because the world has moved on. The world has moved on since 1988, but our legislation has not. So while we gather here in frustration and anger at what we've had to deal with as working people for the last 30 years, we also gather here with a sense of hope. Part of that hope comes from the fact that 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, we elected a progressive government here in Alberta, and one of the core constituencies of that government is the labor movement itself. But that's not the only reason I'm hopeful, brothers and sisters. I'm hopeful because in the rest of Canada and in the rest of the world, people are starting to recognize that union rights are not only human rights, but they're also good for the economy. Now, let me just point out two things that have happened over the last couple of years that I think are important for the conversation we're starting today. The first is that over the last 7 years, the Supreme Court of Canada, in response to challenges brought in front of them by many of the unions in the crowd today, they've made decisions about workers' rights which have a profound effect, or have the potential to have a profound effect on our lives and the work that we do as unions. So whether it was the recent Supreme Court decision on the Saskatchewan Federation of Labour case, the RCMP case, the Health Services case, you know what our Supreme Court is saying right now? They've made a decision that Canadians, working Canadians, including Albertans, have the constitutionally protected right to join a union. It's our right to join a union is protected by our Constitution. And we have the constitutionally protected right to bargain collectively and even strike. These are constitutionally protected rights. Now, that was not the case in 1988 when our Labor Relations Code, but it is the case today. And brothers and sisters, I'm not sure how many of you have read these decisions, but I got to give you the reason that they made the decision. In these decisions, the court made these rulings that we have these constitutionally protected rights because they recognized that unions and the work that we do on behalf of our members and working people more broadly, unions are good for society. That's what they said. And that wasn't the case in 1988 when they were writing this legislation, but it is the case today. The law and the opinion of our lawmakers at the highest levels is that this is a constitutionally protected right. But at the same time that the court was coming to these profound and important decisions, you know what? Other people were talking about the value of unions. So for example, over the last just 3 years, a whole series of previously conservative economic think tanks and organizations like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Conference Board of Canada, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, all these big conservative economic organizations, they've been looking at the global economy. And they've been crunching numbers. And they've come to a conclusion which mirrors the conclusion that was reached by the Supreme Court of Canada. And what is that conclusion? They've concluded that not only are unions good for society, but unions and collective bargaining are actually good for the economy. And why is that? And you know, like for all of us, this seems like a no-brainer. But the reason that all these pointy-headed economists have finally realized that societies that have stronger unions and more collective bargaining, they looked at the numbers and the countries and jurisdictions that have more unions and more collective agreements. They're characterized by lower rates of inequality, better public services, and more robust economic growth. And so, why is this? This runs counter to everything we've been told by all these supposed economic and political gurus over the last 30 years. They've been telling us, they've been trying to convince people, even working people, that unions are bad for the economy. We drive up costs, we make it with companies less productive. That's horseshit! And now more and more economists are coming to that conclusion that this right-wing mantra, and honestly it's been an experiment. They promised us that all these right-wing policies were going to create economic growth, they were going to grow the middle class. The opposite happened. Ever since these guys got their hands on the levers of power, ever since these guys started making public policy, the economy is stagnated, the economy is shrunk, average incomes have gone down. So this experiment is a failed experiment, brothers and sisters. And so why is it? Why is it that countries and jurisdictions that facilitate and promote unionization and collective bargaining, why is it that these jurisdictions do so much better on all of these measures? It can be summarized in 3 simple words. Consumer purchasing power. When unions have more power, when more people are covered by the agreements that we collectively negotiate, that puts money in the pockets of people. And you know what people do with that money? They spend it in the economy. And so when all these right-wingers that we've had so much of in the last 30 years, when they say that the captains of industry, the CEOs, they say that they're job creators. You know who the real job creators are? Working people! Working people are the real job creators. And if they're covered by union negotiated collective agreements, they're going to create even more jobs. And that's good for the economy. So here's the problem. Here's the problem. At the same time that our courts have been concluding that unions are good for society, and at the same time that economists have been concluding that unions are good for the economy, we continue to have legislation in this province that does the exact opposite. We have legislation that discourages workers from joining unions, make it harder for workers to join unions, and discourages the process of collective bargaining. So if we want a healthier society, and if we want a stronger economy, you know what we need? We need more unions, and we need more collective bargaining. That's the secret. Because you know what, brothers and sisters, the reason we legislation that promotes and facilitates unionization and collective bargaining is because unions and the process of collective bargaining create a stronger middle class, and a stronger middle class is the foundation of a robust economy. And that is the fact that is ignored by this legislation. So this is why I'm hopeful, brothers and sisters. I'm hopeful because we've had 30 years of an experiment. We've had 30 years of an experiment that has failed, and now we're here to say that the emperor has no clothes. I just got an image of Ralph Klein with no clothes in my mind. I'm never going to be able to get that on my head. But, sorry, now you do too. But so we're at this point where we have more and more people realizing the benefit of unions and collective bargaining. And we have a government that was elected by working people like ourselves. But we still have this crappy legislation that's letting working people down. So we have the knowledge, we have the insight, and we have the opportunity, and now we have to seal the deal, brothers and sisters. The good news is that the provincial government has announced that they are doing a review of both the Employment Standards Code and the Labor Code. But I gotta tell you, brothers and sisters, I've been in that building, and these guys are, this new government that we helped elect, they're being lobbied every day by corporations and businesses who are telling them now is not the time to change your labor legislation. They're being lobbied every day. They're being lobbied every day by corporations and business groups that say, this is a bridge too far, the economy is too weak. And the result is that these people, and a lot of the people in this new government are our people, literally half of that caucus are former union members, activists, union presidents of labor, of district labor councils. In fact, 3 members of my executive council are sitting in that government as members of their caucus. But here's the thing. They're getting a lot of pressure from business. Well, you know what we need to do for our friends that we helped elect? We need to make sure that they understand that it's not just business that has an opinion on these issues. We need them to understand that working people, the people who helped get them elected, want them to change these outdated, unfair, and rigged pieces of legislation. So in the same way that business is pushing them in the wrong direction, we have to push them in the right direction and seize this opportunity to unstack the deck, untip the playing field, and give Alberta the kind of labor legislation that will allow our middle class to grow and thrive. Unstack the deck! 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 Okay, so I'm going to turn the microphone over now. I'm reluctant to do that, but we've got a couple more speakers today, and each one of them are going to address certain aspects of the labor code that need to be changed. But I want to make it clear that for us in the labor movement, the AFL, we just came out of our convention, and we are determined, the delegates at our convention from our 25 different unions, 175,000 members, we are determined to seize this moment to not just tweak our labor code, not just tweak our employment standards code, but we want to encourage this government to seize this opportunity to drag both of these pieces of legislation kicking and screaming from the, I was going to say 20th century, from the 19th century, to drag these pieces of legislation kicking and screaming into the 21st century and make them the kind of legislation that we need